Well, Kenyon, it was really fun being with you today, and I want to thank you for a great podcast because I can't imagine that there's anything else that we need to discuss before we
Before you leave, do you want to wind down a little bit? Because I got a little bit of a story time that might help give some context to some of the stuff we've been talking about.
That was reverse psychology.
3D chess.
Yeah, I'm playing 8D chess today. 80D.
80 chess. 80 boards.
80 chess.
All at once.
Do you remember when Darren Brown? That's all I'm going to say. Do you remember when Darren Brown?
Yes. Yeah, Darren Brown played an odd number, by the way. Trick revealed, an odd number of grandmasters and theoretically simultaneously and theoretically won against the group. But there was a trick involved because he's a magician, so...
I would hate to get us off track here because you promised me a story time.
Let's do it. So this is about the 1964 North American tour, part 1. So much happened in this tour. In fact, I'd say this is one of the craziest tours to ever exist, Beatles or otherwise.
Say no more. I can say no more.
So it's going to be in 2 parts, and we've already talked about pieces of it elsewhere. And this part is called Invading America.
Go ahead.
General trends I noticed. There's so much information here. I just wanted to talk about this as a whole. Everywhere the Beatles went on this tour, it was unruly and unsafe. Like, they could die, the fans could have died, the police, the owners of the businesses, everything was bad. 2, the promoters were specifically asked not to set up seating behind the Beatles on the stage to fit more people. And they all almost did on every venue they played.
Agreed.
3, often they had to stop the show because of a dangerous situation while people trying to rush the stage or something. And there's like multiple occasions of either Derek Taylor or someone coming out to address the audience saying, "We will not continue the show unless you settle down." There's, I think, a clip of that in the anthology. That's one of like almost a dozen instances of that. Okay. 4, jelly beans thrown onto stage were the least worrisome things that the Beatles had to care about. Paul got hit with a raw steak, for example. There's a whole bunch of stuff, okay? Jelly beans would have been... George would have loved the jelly beans.
Somewhere in North America, a butcher's daughter was a huge Beatles fan.
Right. She just like had it on her. It's like, what do I throw? Oh, I got a prime rib. 5. I don't know what number I'm on. 5. There were a great attempt to decoy where the Beatles were, with fake cars transporting people in Beatles wigs. Again, almost every leg of the trip. And finally, after they left their hotels...
and 10.
And 15. After they left their hotels, people would come and scavenge anything they could find and sell it. So I'm sure you've heard about either like... This is a Beatles sheet. They cut them up and sold them. Again, that's not a one-off thing. We're talking carpets they walked on, doorknobs they touched, towels they used, furniture. Like they once raided a whole restaurant that they ate at in the hotel and sold every piece of furniture from there. It was insane.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to go we're bigger than Jesus, but those are called relics. You know, there's a term for that.
Right. Or the almighty dollar. One of the two. Either way, it's a
true
relic.
Story.
They started off this tour in San Francisco, and
you had me.
There was
yeah, you got it. Good.
So, by the way, this took place in 1964, obviously, from like late August to late September. It's about a month that they did this tour. Their first show was supposed to be in San Diego, but that got canceled because they had to do an engagement in Britain and they couldn't reschedule, and so they had to come later. The day before they arrived on their first city, called San Francisco, there was a shanty town that the people built there. It was called Beatlesville. It was like this big deal. I'm just going to brush over it here, but there's about 5,000 to 10,000 people living there for
you kidding
2 days before the Beatles arrived.
This is weird because you know how like Taylor Swift gets like credited for like when she comes to town, like not only is there this huge boom to the local economy, but like they actually change like the Google Maps and it like has like an impact on how we like really.
This is like a shanty town. I mean, this is like tents and people just sleeping out.
This is even bigger. I don't know that Taylor Swift have shanty towns. I think it's just online that they're just declaring themselves Swiftville or something.
Oh, right.
This is incredible.
Yeah, well, it was incredible when the Beatles arrived. So everyone's there waiting. They built this like platform for them to get on. The Beatles were brought in and they got up on stage and instantly realized they were in grave danger and ran into their limo. Because as soon as they were there, people were just rushing the stage.
Yeah, that'll be a no for me, dog.
Yeah, like they went there and people were just like breaking through the like metal fences or whatever, and they just left. And it was said that from the time they arrived to the time they got in their limo was 42 seconds.
God, it's depressing in here, isn't it?
It went off the rails fast. People were really angry. Anyway, they played a place called the Cow Palace the next night.
Oh, sure.
This is actually an exhibit where they showed livestock.
Is that where Paul got hit? Because
no, that's funny though.
Okay.
Yeah,
it would make more sense.
No, they showed like livestock and did rodeos. It was not a butchering cow palace.
Okay, cool.
The next gig was at Las Vegas, and then they went to their next town after that, which is Seattle. We talked about this actually in the episode that went up today.
Seattle?
Yeah, it's in Washington State.
Oh, got you.
Seattle. The Beatles went to Seattle.
Okay, got you.
They stayed at the famed Edgewater Hotel, and they were photographed fishing out of the window of one of their rooms.
What were they fishing for?
Fish. I just think it was a publicity photo. And then they played the Seattle Center Coliseum, and the MC for that evening, almost all the MCs were like radio DJ personalities. His name was Lan Roberts. He told the crowd that he shook Ringo's hand and washed his hands and let them drip into a bottle and would be giving this bottle away on his show the next day.
Genius.
That's one word.
Genius.
Anyway, that night, apparently, Paul and Ringo were antsy and they wanted to go do something outside the hotel. They got snuck out to the Space Needle and went up to the observation deck. It was kind of fun.
That's cool. The Seattle Needle.
Then the Beatles went to Canada, actually. They went to a city called Vancouver.
I know that one.
And then they went down to Los Angeles. They played the show at the Hollywood Bowl here, which we talked about in the Long Tall Sally podcast. This was an anomaly on the tour. The Beatles said that they felt safe and it sounded great, both being odd occurrences.
Yes.
The next day, Alan Livingston, the Capitol Records president at the time, held a meet and greet garden party where the Hollywood elite of LA could come and, quote, meet the Beatles. It cost $25 to come, although they were all personally invited and the money was donated to charity. And they took pictures and shook the Beatles' hands. And you see these photos, they're just hilarious. The Beatles do not want to be there. They are just like tired and annoyed that they're this zoo exhibit.
Yeah.
Also, Ringo didn't wear a tie, which apparently made Brian Epstein mad. So Ringo especially looks angry in the photos. Then they went to a nightclub afterwards. I'm sure they did a number of places, but they did here. And Paul stayed back to hang out with Peggy Lipton, I think in the hotel, but he wanted to hang out with Peggy Lipton, who was in the Mod Squad.
Oh, okay.
TV series, wife to Quincy Jones, mother of Rashida Jones.
Whoa. Yeah, that's a heavy hitter.
Paul then later went over to Burt Lancaster's house and watched A Shot in the Dark, the recent Pink Panther movie, Peter Sellers. Anyway, at the nightclub, someone took a photo of George a little too close, and he threw a drink in their face, which was also caught on photo and published in the newspaper the next day. And I was reading this book about this, and it just said, yeah, and John was canoodling with Jane Mansfield. I was like, what? John was there, just hanging out with Jane Mansfield. Oh, okay. Wow. I guess there's no more of that story, at least not on official.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then they went to Denver. They played the show at the Red Rocks Amphitheater. Joan Baez was also in town, and she met them backstage, and she was invited to continue with them for the next few dates because they're going to go to New York. So they're like, come on with us and go to New York with us. So she did. They forgot to set up a microphone for Ringo, but he said he wouldn't be able to hear me anyway, so that's fine. The Red Rocks was so prepared for bands coming from elsewhere that they had oxygen tanks backstage if they needed them, because Denver is notoriously the mile-high city, very high above sea level, and oftentimes people who don't live there like get out of breath just from walking around.
Yeah.
Apparently we don't have any evidence that the Beatles needed that, but it was there. Then they went to Cincinnati, and then they were made official Kentucky Colonels in Ohio at a press conference.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah. I mean, It's like a Kentucky Colonel is a title. And they, while they were in Ohio, they got that. So in Ohio, they are Colonel John Lennon and Colonel Paul McCartney, etc.
Okay. Yeah, sure beats
More
Sir.
important than being knighted?
Yeah.
TBH?
Yeah.
Share your opinion on that.
Yeah, it's better to be Sir Paul McCartney.
It really is.
Yeah, it really is.
Sorry about that. That was defamatory.
Yeah. To people in Ohio just now.
They're all equally awesome.
Yes. I mean, I'm not a knight or a colonel.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm barely a mister.
They went to New York and they stayed at the Delmonico Hotel. They weren't thinking it was possible to get to the venue with a normal vehicle. So the tour manager was calling to get them a helicopter, and they did get one. And that's how they went to the show in New York. They had the helicopter land on the top of their building, and they just went up there and went to the show. But they were late because of the problems with the helicopter, so they literally were flying in during the Righteous Brothers' set. They were on the tour as well, and that greatly annoyed them. And they later left the tour, but it's possible that there was some other reasons involved, but it is well known that they were annoyed with the Beatles because they were really stealing all the attention.
Yeah.
Which, they performed at the Forest Hills Tennis Stadium, and everything happens in New York. They met Benny Goodman and his 2 daughters. During the show, a girl named Mary Smith and her friends rushed the stage. They had snuck into the VIP section and they were able to get up on stage of this venue. And Mary headed for George and her friend wanted Ringo. Her friend was intercepted and caught, but Mary did get to George and grabbed him mid-song, which we believe it to be I Want to Hold Your Hand. There's photos of this, and George looked terrified as she was screaming and running at him and grabbing him. And she said, I was surprised that he was so terrified and not happy. They got back to the helicopter and went back to the hotel. And there was a hospitality room that Derek Taylor had to man, basically. So, people kept coming in, and, there was a buffer between the Beatles and the outside. So Derek Taylor had to field everyone. Some people were let into the Beatles, some weren't.
Who's that little old man?
Derek Taylor. Also, Bob Dylan, he went in with his road manager and a rock journalist, and they introduced themselves. This is the first time the Bob Dylan met the Beatles. It's a big moment.
Wow.
Again, we could probably do a whole podcast on just this meeting, but I'll just give the highlights here. He asked for cheap wine, and Brian Epstein and his Brian Epstein way said, we only have champagne. So he's like, fine. But he wanted cheap wine. And so apparently they all popped pills while he was there, and Dylan was like, I don't want to do that. I want to do marijuana. They were like, what? And they're like, hey, have you tried marijuana? And they were like, oh, no, let's have some. Apparently this was not the first time they had had marijuana, but they had a different kind, maybe not as potent version. That nothing really happened, so they wrote it off. They didn't think much about it. So this is the time they first had an effect for marijuana. I guess, I don't know, who cares? But they tried the marijuana.
They tried the marijuana.
The marijuana cigarettes. Bob was confused because he's like, in your song, I Want to Hold Your Hand, you say, I get high. So you obviously have smoked, and you smoke all the time. And they're like, no. John's like, it's I can't hide. He's like, oh. Okay. So they roll a joint, they pass it around, they give it to John. John doesn't want to do it. He gives it to Ringo, and he calls him his royal taster. And Ringo starts smoking it, doesn't realize the etiquette is to pass it around. He thought it was a cigarette, so he just smoked the whole thing. And Bob was like, okay. And he just made another cigarette. The party's wild. And this is the party where Paul wrote down, there are 7 levels. during the party, he read that he was kind of like going through 7 levels that night. And every time he met someone, he met them again, he saw them again, he thought he was like entering a new level, for whatever that means. So then they went to Atlantic City. They played at the convention hall, and this was the final show for the Righteous Brothers, by the way. And on their rest days here in Atlantic City, Paul wrote What You're Doing, Every Little Thing, and interestingly enough, he forgot the lyric sheet he wrote down, which a maid found, and they gave it to the promoter for Atlantic City, who was kind of like a mob boss, basically. And anyway, I'm not sure if it was returned or not. It doesn't seem like it was. So I wonder if he had to rewrite the lyrics and if the lyrics are different. It was also here that they met with the astrologist psychic Jean Dixon, who wrote for like magazines and newspapers and was quite famous for, quote, predicting the assassination of JFK. And she predicted the Beatles would die in a plane crash from Philadelphia to Indianapolis.
That's the worst, when people predict that you're going to die.
Right. So, next stop, Philadelphia. Ooh. The Beatles went, and then the next one after that, Indianapolis. The Beatles arrived safe. Okay, so they arrived safe. Yes, they didn't die, but they played the State Fair, of all places. And when they played the show, the Beatles Cadillac was allowed to drive on the Indy 500 racetrack. And that's my story. I hope you enjoyed it. Part 2 coming next week.